This, UNESCO says early childhood care and education aims at the holistic development of a child's social, emotional, cognitive and physical needs in order to build a solid and broad foundation for lifelong learning and well-being, and has the possibility to nurture caring, capable and responsible future citizens. Isn't this exactly what we need? Let's find out. We've invited to our studio Dr. Anne-Marie Morgan, Professor and Dean of Programs in Education at the University of South Australia. Good evening and welcome, Professor.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Professor Morgan, what we need in this world is kind, empathetic, compassionate children who grow up into kind, empathetic and compassionate adults.
Yes.
How does early childhood development contribute to a child's future?
Okay, so we do know from the research that where there is a structured early childhood program for children, that all of those needs that you talked about from the United Nations are catered to, that you can plan to have a program that includes those elements. Once you have those elements in a program, you can look to where each individual child has special needs to meet those requirements and what might be missing or the next thing that they need to do. So absolutely that is the purpose of early childhood education, is to build global citizens.
You've worked extensively in Australia, so you can update us on the Australian perspective as well as from an academic perspective. How does this take place? Because in developing countries like Sri Lanka, not much attention is focused on early childhood education. In fact, the budgetary allocations are abysmal.
Well, actually it's going the other way in Australia. So we have also recognised the importance of these years and of education at that level, and we've recently had a Royal Commission into early childhood education from which recommendations have gone to government around increasing the amount of early childhood education to begin preschool at 3 rather than 4. It used to be just 4-year-olds started in Australia. Now we're moving to universal 3-year-old preschool because the research evidence, the academic evidence around the gains in cognitive skills, in social and emotional development, in progression through the goals of childhood that we would like to see are better served with that 3-year-old start. And there is more government money going to support those programs, and especially to prepare more teachers so that we have skilled and highly regarded professionals working in those preschools to build those skills and development of young people.
Can you speak to us a bit about any of the key studies that have been undertaken and the mapping process and the findings?
Sure. So because we're able to do more neuropsychological studies now with MRI imaging and with very targeted psychology tests, we are able to see enhanced cognitive skills through executive functioning, through the capacity to engage with others better. So we're seeing those key studies. We're also seeing studies where children's adjustment to society is improved, so they're socially more competent to work with other children. And as I mentioned before, where there are gaps, they are also identified, and then the research studies around early intervention really tell us that if we're able to work with 3-year-olds, we will get much better outcomes in school for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. So they're the areas of research that are really moving ahead at the moment.
Okay. Can you also take us through some of the challenges in working in this area?
So, it is challenging because it's it's very important this kind of work. So some of the challenges are the very diverse needs of children.
Sure.
So we go from the very bright, gifted, highly accomplished child at one end to others who have special needs that might be on the autism spectrum, or who are intellectually behind some of their peers, who come to preschool with no literacy skills at all compared to some who come able to read and write already. So the challenge of dealing with that diverse range of children is certainly something that we need to prepare for, and hence the need for programs of 3-4 years so that teachers can understand all of that whole range of needs of children and deal with that. So one of the other challenges is getting enough teachers into schools. There's a shortage worldwide of qualified early childhood teachers, and many centres run without the full number of qualified people. So that's a challenge too, getting a workforce, providing for the diversity of children. Also within any society there are different cultures, different socio-economic backgrounds, and so we also need to prepare for how do we work with these different communities, how do we bring the communities and their families into the work that we do as well, so that they feel involved and engaged and they want to bring the children to the schools. So it's a really broad field that deals with the full range of society.
Sure.
In very complex ways.
Professor, not all children come from happy homes. Most children come from broken homes, or from homes where parents are ill-equipped to deal with issues faced by children. In such an event, does this early childhood education process also have measures to involve the parents or guardians to educate them on how they can best deal with their children?
Yes, so we have within the programs that we offer at universities courses on trauma-informed work, working with refugees, working with very low socio-economic families, working with Indigenous communities, and absolutely early childhood centres must connect with families and communities, and there is an educative process with those families. Often centres run additional sessions for parents. They invite them to presentations. They provide them with information about what their children will be doing at school, and the value and benefits of eating well, of exercising well, of learning to read and write. So that information is provided to families.
And what's the role of the state in this?
So in Australia, the state supports and subsidises all types of early childhood education and care. The aim is that every family will be able to send their children to these centres. So there is a high level of provision by the government to do this, and that's increasing. As I said, they're moving from providing that for 4-year-olds to now providing it for 3-year-olds. And even the children who are in family daycare, or in a long-term, daycare that's not a full preschool program, the government subsidises that as well, so that parents can work, so that everybody has the opportunity to have their children in an early childhood centre.
Okay. Professor, in Sri Lanka, the situation when it comes to early childhood education is completely different. In your opinion, how do you think we can change this, shift this paradigm so that we too can go into a system of prioritizing early childhood education? Because there is an upcoming budget next week as well, the national budget, and across the board, advocates of education have been advocating for an increase in the budgetary allocation for education. But I think, like you say, we need to have more allocations for early childhood education as well, because this is what molds young children
would benefit from. So winning the hearts and minds of politicians and of government is really critical. And I think the important thing to remember here is that there is nothing more important than our children, and giving them that basis of education will lead to a society that is better off, that has more informed citizens. We can increase, gross domestic product. All of the indicators of a nation that's doing well are derived from the quality of the education that children receive. And as we have this increasing amount of research that tells us that early is best, and certainly early is better than starting at 6 or 7, then we need to be making that argument that you can't invest in anything more important than early childhood education.
Because in countries like Sri Lanka, what usually happens is you try to teach basic human values when kids are in university.
Right.
And by that time, I mean, it's too late.
It is too late. And of course a lot happens in homes, but not in every home. And if there are the national and cultural values that are deemed important, they are also critical at those early stages. So that's the argument we have to make, the importance.
And also, what are your perspectives on how teachers must be incentivized and also encouraged to get into this field of early childhood education? Because we need the best teachers to teach our kids.
We do, and that same question has been something Australia has had to grapple with too, because we have had lesser qualified people, lower paid, a very female workforce, and we have moved to increase the qualification levels, provide scholarships for qualifications to undertake degrees, so that we have more graduates, and then those graduates of full degrees will get paid as full teachers, so that in the same way that primary school or secondary school teachers are paid a very reasonable wage. So we have definitely shifted the emphasis from unqualified, lower pay and mostly a female workforce to being a broader workforce, better pay, better career opportunities, better outcomes.
Professor, can you take us through some of the long-term benefits of early childhood education? Specifically, are there any proven neuropsychological and learning benefits in early childhood education?
Yes, there definitely are. So longitudinal studies that have compared groups who have started at 2, 3, 4 compared to 5, 6, 7-year-olds show us in every instance there are benefits. Early literacy is absolutely critical. to success in learning through all the school years. So that is the main area of intellectual activity that's important, and that's where a structured program can focus on how to obtain those literacy skills and then further develop them as they move into school.
Professor Morgan, let's also discuss the intersectionality of gender, male students and female students who benefit as a result of a comprehensive early childhood education.
There's been some very interesting research work in this area, and which tells us that girls are given more opportunities when they're in structured programs,
Right.
and they perform better in both literacy and numeracy outcomes, and are not disadvantaged in any way as they move into the school years. So that is important, because it has been an area in some parts of the world where girls get education later and then never achieve the same outcomes as boys. So we do know that where there are structured programs for girls early, it gives them the very best chance of having equal opportunities to outcomes.
How important is it to ensure that teachers get continuous training?
So this is really important, because the nature of academic work and research around early childhood education and observation of practice and so on tells us that the field is growing and gaining more knowledge as it develops. So it's important that when teachers have their initial training, that's not the end of their learning. They need a lifetime of learning as well, and opportunities for professional engagement with other teachers, for upskilling in new information that's come through. For example, the gains in understanding how the brain works have absolutely expanded over the last 10 years. So if you trained to be an early childhood teacher 10, 15 years ago, your information is now out of date. So we do need that updating through regular professional learning opportunities for teachers. And teachers really love those opportunities as well, because it allows them to re-engage with the profession, with other colleagues, to learn from the experience that they've gained in the workplace, as well as what's coming out of the literature and the research. So ongoing professional learning is really important to keep the workforce at its best.
Mm-hmm. What's the role of policy in the education discourse?
Yeah, so policy is absolutely critical. And as you were talking about Sri Lanka before, on the elections coming up and the questions of budget, it is a political game as well as a practical process of skilling teachers. So we do need, as a profession and as nations, to be carefully attuned to the impact of policy and the importance of policy, and have advocates and people developing policy and recommendations to government, to funding bodies, to regulatory authorities, so that the very best outcomes can be addressed and are not lost amongst other policy initiatives that might have a louder voice in a public sphere.
Professor Morgan, my final question to you. Across the world, we keep seeing instances of hate, wars being waged, xenophobia, racism, sexism, so much of pain. And people are so ill-equipped to deal with their emotions, that they feel the need to stab, kill, maim. What's the lesson to be learned?
So the lessons in there are that it's never too young to start working on those issues. Young people, very young children, are highly attuned to understanding the relationships of people and of learning about what is good civil behaviour and how to relate with others, how to deal with conflicts in the playground, and with good teaching around that and very structured programs with an awareness of the need to be working towards those outcomes where we reduce racism, we reduce sexism, we reduce violence, gives us a better chance of achieving that with all citizens through that early introduction. One of the things I'm doing at my own university, for example, is introducing some modules on domestic violence into early childhood programs. So I have some experts working on what kinds of stories and games and learning we can introduce for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, so that they grow into citizens with a cultural disposition that knows it's wrong to hurt others and disadvantage them. So again, all of these things point to an early start being better for more positive outcomes.
Professor Anne-Marie Morgan, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your perspectives.
Yeah, my very great pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thank you for watching us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.